we've seen numerous other stories and of athletes driving fast, speeding, shootouts taking place on highways. There was an NFL player that was involved in a massive accident in Dallas, and we've seen people, we've seen individuals that, I remember there was a couple of Cowboys who involved accidents, folks died, they went to prison. And so when this happened, folks are like, here we go, another one. What the hell was he thinking? Oh my God, dude, you about to go to the NFL and earn millions, and now this happens, and then it blows up, and 4 months later, he commits suicide. Now we're learning a totally different deal. Walk us through what you discovered.
Of course, I mean, it's one of those tragic cases, and one of the things we learn, and one of the things we know in the media as we cover these stories over the years, is that the public narrative often wants something to be black and white, right and wrong, villain and hero. Most of life is more complicated than that, right? Very few stories can be litigated. This person is all wrong, this person is all right. There's some stories like that, right? And so what we end up seeing in a case like this is you had all of these bad facts, right? Yes, Kyren Lacy is a big LSU star wide receiver. He is someone who is driving around town in his big Dodge Charger, lime green. He's speeding, he's passing cars, he's doing these other types of things. What happens is that the moments after this crash, when the police arrive, all the witnesses are going, it was all the fault of the Charger, right? It was that guy, we don't know where he was, but it was his Charger, he was passing.
Devil's lies.
What happens very often, late Johnny Cochran used to talk about this, is that sometimes what happens when the police get something wrong is not that they set out that day to wake up and say, we're going to go blame a black guy, but that they encounter a theory of the case and then they try to fit all the evidence into that theory, right? That they start with the narrative and then they go looking for evidence to support it.
And what also happens is the public immediately believes what the cops say.
Exactly.
So, and we've seen it where they do have an agenda, and they know how the public's going to perceive it. So it's as if whatever the cops say initially, that is it. That's the gospel. As if there can be no errors at all, and we know that is not the case.
And beyond that, once the cops say something, they institutionally have no incentive to correct the record, right? They are now out loud and wrong. They're not going to go, oh wait, never mind. That opens them up to liability. It undermines their potential case in the future. So what happened in this case, right? And it's a little complicated because it's about driving and roads, but Kyren Lacy, it's on a 2-lane road down in the South, in states like Louisiana and Texas. We've all been on roads like this, long and winding. Some places you can pass, other places you can't. He's in a place where he's not supposed to be passing everybody, but he whips his car, jumps in front of 4 different cars, so he ends up speeding up to about 88 miles per hour in what is a 40 or 50 mile per hour zone. In front of him, there's the car coming in the lane towards him that he is in its lane for a while, but then he gets back over. There's a pickup truck driver, an old black man who has just picked up his brother from the hospital. He slows down, in part because he sees Kyren in his lane, but also because he's going to pull off the road, right? He's going to pull off into this parking lot and do these other things. Behind that driver is a woman, a 29-year-old black woman, who is, we later find out, listening to music, eating chips out of her pocket, who's following this pickup truck driver a little too quickly. So when he slows down, she realizes she's about to rear-end him, veers into the oncoming traffic, head-on collision with somebody, and that is the car where someone died. And so again, Kyren Lacy's car is not actually physically involved. The legal argument was that he started the chain of events that led one car to slow to another car to hit a third car.
Because initially, how it was described, Kyren Lacy caused this accident.
And part of the reason was, and we've seen this, not because the police released it, although they have since released it, but because Kyren Lacy's attorney ended up putting out some information. This is now after he takes his life, unfortunately. But we start to see in the police body camera video what happens when the police officers arrive. And when the police officers arrive, one of the witnesses, a driver who had been one of the cars who Kyren had just sped past, is loud and wrong, right? He comes in, he says, I saw the whole thing, it was this Dodge Charger, and he lays out a scenario that made it sound like it was a move out of the Fast and the Furious. Like Kyren had split these cars, and then they crashed into each other, We know definitively that's not what happened. But that is the first witness who the police hear from. And so they begin their investigation trying to prove the narrative that the green Charger was at fault, that it was somehow directly involved in the case. What we later see, because again, you have to remember, this car accident happens 70 feet in front of Kyren. He has no reason necessarily to believe it has anything to do with him. It's the car in front of him that ends up in a car accident. Right. He slowly approaches the scene and then drives around it. Now, what we know, as we mentioned the tease, right? The police came out and they charged Kyren. They said it was the vehicular homicide was his fault, that he fled the scene because he drove around and kept going. But they also said, right, and this is where objective facts can turn into public narrative character assassinations, right? You can say a bunch of things that are accurate, right, but that might not be complete. The police also said, well, and the first thing Kyren Lacy did was he called an attorney, right? The narrative they were building was he caused this accident, he knew he caused this accident.
About my grandmother and her,
and he knew it, right? So which is why he should have stayed, and he should have. What we learn later is that attorney was his stepfather, who he speaks to every day, who handles his endorsement deals. It's a week and a half before the NFL draft. What I find out when I'm having my conversations is that Kyren Lacy didn't initially call the attorney. He initially called his father, who he also talks to every day. And he's calling to talk about something else. And then he goes, hey, Dad, something crazy just happened. Actually, there was just this accident on the road I just saw. I'm wondering if I should have stayed and tried to help them. And Kyren's dad goes, call your stepfather. You know, he's an attorney. These two men are close. They kind of co-parent. They know each other. He goes, call your stepfather on that. Doesn't sound like you should have stayed. You didn't have anything to do with it. Calls the stepfather who says, wait, so you weren't really involved in this directly? Well, look, Kyren, if there was blood in something, would you have been able to do something? Kyren's like, I don't like blood. So he goes, well, no, there's nothing you could have done. You did nothing wrong, right? And so this phone call that is this young man speaking to his father and his stepfather that was just innocuous in the public becomes moments after causing this car crash by recklessly driving, killing a 78-year-old Marine veteran. And to be clear, it's a tragedy that her mom was killed, right? He then calls an attorney. Well, we know it was the stepfather now, right? And so what we saw again is this space between the public record, the objective facts that the police or the prosecutors can put out,
look at the
and then
video.
what is actually true, and how that begins to
That he wasn't even there when the accident took impact.
And you talk to his family, you talk to others.
He drove up
and they
later after the impact had already taken
The
place.
pain he endured because it was being talked about on blogs, on social media, on sports talk shows.
See that on the video camera
He gets this
from the building across
This
the
is a
street.
young man who was expected to be a first-round draft pick. We're talking about you're going to sign a 5-year contract. It's going to be millions upon millions of dollars. You're going to be seen as the savior of some NFL franchise, and you go
Once the
from
first line told though, they're gonna believe the first line just like they do about every other line that's told.
I remember I was talking to this, because when you do a magazine piece like this, you talk to a whole bunch of people who don't end up in the piece, right? But as part of it, I was talking to as many people as I could who themselves were black men, public figures who had been through some type of scandal, disgrace. I talked to Kwame Kilpatrick about this. I talked to a woman, Dana London in Chicago, who works with former athletes. And one of the things that I was talking to several prominent activists who had their ups and their downs, and one of the things someone said to me that I don't forget, I haven't forgotten, is that it's hard to understand the loneliness of fame sometimes, right? That you can never, I do have the line in the piece where it says, you know, few of us will ever carry the burden of almost making it to the NFL, which makes it impossible for us to understand what it must feel like to lose that. To be
Book of Amos, chapter 1. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, The Lord will roar from Zion, and utter his voice from Jerusalem. and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. Thus saith the Lord. For 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. I will send a fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut off the inhabitant from the plain of Aben, and him that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden. And the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kir, saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity, to deliver them up to Edom. But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. And I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord God. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. I will send a fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. But I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Bozrah. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour the palaces thereof, with shouting in the day of battle, with a tempest in the day of the whirlwind. Their king shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, saith the Lord.